Here's something interesting. Here's something interesting with Randy Cohen.
Many a night I saw the Pleiades, rising through the mellow shade, glitter like a swarm of fireflies, tangled in a silver braid. Those beautiful words were written by the English poet Alfred Lord Tennyson. But what were those fireflies he was talking about? Today on Here's Something Interesting, cars, stars, and just a little bit of math as we explore one of the most fascinating objects in the sky. If you look south on a winter's night from a spot in the northern hemisphere, you'll see a group of stars that are unusually close together. They're over the left shoulder of the constellation Orion. Well, they're to the right as we look at the Orion constellation, but if Orion were really up there in the sky, he would call that his left shoulder. Every civilization that's ever written down their thoughts on the stars has mentioned them. They're mentioned several times in the Bible. The Maori people of New Zealand call them the eyes of God. The Babylonians called them star of stars. The Romans called them the bunch of grapes. And the Japanese called them Subaru, which means unite. If you've ever wondered why there's a car company called Subaru, and why its logo is 6 stars of differing sizes set in a seemingly random pattern, now you know. The Greeks, like Tennyson and like us, call them the Pleiades. The stars are sometimes called the Seven Sisters from a Greek myth in which Atlas and his wife Pleione have 7 daughters. And the Seven Sisters meme has become a significant one in Western culture, most prominently in reference to the 7 elite colleges that educated women back when Harvard, Yale, and the other Ivy League schools accepted only men.
Come to Radcliffe and meet Harvard men.
Or come to Wellesley and marry them.
No, party with me.
Free ride! Free ride!
But the Seven Sisters tale is thought to be an after-the-fact explanation. Almost certainly the word Pleiades comes from the Greek verb plein, which means to sail, and refers to the fact that the Pleiades rise in the heavens at the beginning of the Greek sailing season. The story of Atlas and Pleione was invented by the Greeks long after the stars were named. Still, the 9 brightest individual stars are called for Atlas, Pleione, and their 7 daughters in the story. But wait a minute. Subaru's logo has 6 stars, but there are 7 sisters and 9 stars in the sky. What's going on here? Can't anyone count? The answer is that it depends how clear the skies are and how sharp your eyes are. There are 9 stars that are bright enough to see with the unaided eye under ideal conditions. But 4 of the stars are in 2 pairs that are so close together that most of the time each appears to be a single object. That gets you down to 7. And one of those 7 is sufficiently dim that it can only be seen by the most acute observers under the very best of conditions. So more often than not, there are only 6 visible Pleiades.
But you don't need a telescope to enjoy astronomy, Bart. There are all the constellations you've heard so much about. There's Orion, the Swan, the Chariot Race.
Why don't they look anything like their names?
Well, you do have to use your imagination. Look, there's the 3 wise men.
By the way, the Pleiades are extremely hot and bright stars. The brightest puts out about 1,000 times more light than our sun, Sol, and even the dimmest of them is about 40 times brighter than the sun. That star only appears dim compared to its neighbors. Ever since mankind came to realize that the stars were suns like our own, not merely dots painted on the floor of heaven, they've wondered something about the Pleiades. Are they actually very close together, or do they just lie along the same line of sight? Atlas is about 400 light years away. It could be that Pleione is very close to Atlas, or it could be that it's about twice as far, but just in the same general direction. For comparison, Alpha Centauri, the star that's closest to our solar system, is about 4.3 light years away. Alternatively, maybe all the Pleiades are in a cluster. About 250 years ago, an English clergyman named John Michel decided to try to find out. Think about how he could possibly do it. It's not as if he could travel 100 light years off to the side to look at those stars from a different angle. Although Michel was a pastor by profession, he was a talented amateur astronomer and statistician. To see how he attacked the problem, let's start with a trivia question. Consider the sky on a cloudless night in the middle of nowhere. It's a veritable carpet of stars. Now, suppose you take a quarter and hold it far enough from your eye that it appears to be the same size as the full moon as seen from Earth. Now, keeping the quarter the same distance from your eye, move it to a random patch of sky. On average, how many stars would you expect it to block out? Pause the video for a moment, think about it and take a guess, and then hit play. Are you back? The most common guess I get when I ask this question is 10. So if you guessed lower than that, you did well.
To that I say, all right, all right, all right.
The correct answer is 0. Well, a fraction that rounds to 0. It's true that there are thousands of naked eye visible stars, but the sky is pretty big and the moon is pretty small. In fact, you have to hold the quarter 9 feet away from your eye in order to make it as small as the full moon is in the sky. And so on average, the stars are not that close together. The Pleiades cover an area the size of about half a dozen moons. And so the odds of getting 9 or even 7 stars into a space that small are exceptionally low. Michel did a clever computation based on the average distances between stars. He found that if stars were randomly distributed, the odds against having even one such grouping in the entire night sky were less than 1 in 500,000. He concluded that the Pleiades must be part of a star cluster, that they really were close together in space, not just stars that were all in the same direction from Earth. This was a bold statement to make back in the 1760s, but he nailed it. We now know that the Pleiades are part of a tightly grouped cluster of over 300 stars, only a handful of which are visible to the naked eye. One last question. Since we can't travel such enormous distances through space, how can we, even now, know that the Pleiades are part of a cluster? Maybe that 1 in 500,000 coincidence hit. The answer is that we now have techniques for measuring how fast a star is moving relative to us. The farther away a star is, the faster it's moving relative to us. This is a consequence of the fact that the universe is still expanding from the Big Bang, the explosion that occurred at the instant of its creation. To see why this is true, consider blowing up a balloon. If you mark 2 points on an uninflated balloon with a pen, and then blow the balloon up, those 2 points will move apart. And the further apart the 2 points were when you started, the faster they'll move away from one another. 2 points right next to each other on the balloon will separate slowly, while 2 points on opposite sides of the balloon will move apart rapidly. The stars in the Pleiades are all moving away from us at approximately the same speed, and that's how we know they must be close to one another in space. By the way, if you're curious as to how we can tell how fast stars are moving away from us, Google the phrase red shift. I learned about the Pleiades from Jordan Ellenberg's book, How Not to Be Wrong. Ellenberg is a math professor at the University of Wisconsin, and the book is a wonderful guide as to how to make smart decisions in ordinary life. Most of the reasoning tools in the book have a mathematical flavor, but Ellenberg always keeps things accessible to the non-mathematical reader. And he has a keen eye for stories, like this one about the Pleiades, that make his ideas easy to remember. It's that rare book that's both fun to read and contains useful information on how to lead a happier life, and I highly recommend it. Also, I want to make a bonus book recommendation. The fact about the moon and the night sky is from the wonderful novel Black Hills by Dan Simmons. Simmons first became really famous for his Hyperion series, which are science fiction, but he appears to be on a mission to prove that there is no genre in which he cannot write a fantastic novel. My personal favorite is called The Crook Factory. It's a thriller based on real-life events in the extraordinary life of the writer Ernest Hemingway. But my advice is to find a kind of novel you like, identify a Simmons offering of that type, read it, and then expand out your Simmons reading from there. Enjoy!
This life is more than ordinary. Can I get you maybe even 3 of these coming from a space to teach you of the Pleiades? Can't stop the spirits when they need you. This life is more than just a read through.